I would argue the AFC East has been one of the most entertaining divisions in the league this year.
The other three teams have a lot of storylines around them. I mean, you had an early MVP run for Josh Allen that falters off. Then he has his best game of the season on Monday night. You got a resurgent Dolphins team with a Coach of the Year candidate, and you have a pesky Pats team at 6-6 that just stomped all over the Chargers. To me, if you had asked me on Sunday or Monday morning, I would have been a little bit more wishy-washy about this division, but given how well the Bills played on Monday night, given that they beat the 49ers, which is a big game for them, I do still think they're going to win the division. They do have a tough game coming up this week, but they play the Dolphins in Week 17, which is big. So I think that – and look, I hope that that's a winner-take-all game. That'd be awesome. That'd be great.
Absolutely. To be honest with you, I almost forget sometimes in this wacky year because there's so many other things to think about other than football. But we're about to have a 7-team conference playoff this year. And I can see any of these three teams not only squeaking into the playoffs, obviously the division winner. I could see two of those wildcard spots being filled by AFC East teams. Mm-hmm. I do. And I could see any of these three teams just by the nature of the way they play and the nature of the way their season's going, finding some kind of success in the playoffs. That's what makes this division so good, is I can see any of these three teams opening eyes to some extent in the playoffs. And that's what I like about the AFC East this year. That's what I'm looking forward to in the playoffs, is because I think at least two of those teams are getting to the playoffs, and it's going to be good. But you touched upon Josh Allen. And the Buffalo Bills, because the Bills are in first place in the division right now. Dolphins a game behind them. But we'll talk about the Bills for a little bit, because you mentioned, Chris, that Josh Allen may no longer be an MVP candidate for this year, but he did have one of the games of his life Monday night. I apologize. 4 touchdowns. It was the third time this year he's been the AFC Offensive Player of the Week. So he has been good for the Bills. And perhaps they're the number one reason why they're in first place. But my only worry is, and I'm not sure how much of a worry it is, but I guess as a pessimist myself it is, how much of this success is Josh Allen? And how much are the Bills depending on him this year?
Well, I think it's a little bit more than anticipated. And where I thought you were going with that was your worry was he looked so terrible against Houston last year, which would be true.
He did.
You remember back in January of last year, Bills played the Texans on the Saturday wildcard game, and Allen looks awful. He literally threw the game away, and he was really, really bad. And then the Texans played the Chiefs after that. But so not that the Bills were going to go to the Super Bowl or anything, but he did look really bad. And I thought that's where you're going to go. And I think to how much they rely on Josh Allen, it's more than expected because their defense is not as good as it was last year. Their defense has really just been okay. They played pretty well on Monday. They played well a couple weeks in a row. But in the grand scheme of the top 7 teams in the AFC, they're kind of middle of the road in terms of their defense. And their offense has been great. So for me, it's a lot about Josh Allen and questions about the playoffs because of how bad he was last year. And we'll see if that carries over. It's possible that he figures it out and that was a one-time thing. But like Lamar Jackson, you can't rule out that this is a career-long issue.
I get why you were thinking that I was going towards he looked so bad against Houston last year. But the reason I didn't go there, it's actually not as much of a worry for me as it sounds like it is for you. Mm-hmm. But because I tend to give people especially teams overall, franchises who are back on the up and up again, like the Bills have been over the last couple of years. You have to give them time once they get into the playoffs. It is not often a team, first try or even second try, as a newly formed, new look franchise, has that kind of success in the playoffs. It takes a couple of years to figure that out. So, yeah, Josh Allen looked terrible in that January playoff game against Houston, but that does not worry me as much because it takes time. But in terms of defense, that is where my worries lie with the Bills. I totally agree with you that because come the playoffs, and I do think I think the Bills are going to end up winning this division, and they're gonna host they're probably going to host a wild card game the first week of the playoffs. But when they have to face all playoff level teams come the playoffs, and they got to face playoff level defenses, maybe you can squeeze by in one game, but 2 weeks into the playoffs is when it really starts to dial in. And the teams with the good defenses are going to survive. So that is my worry for the Bills. I don't know how they fix that going into these last 4 weeks. Perhaps you do, but that is where my anxieties lie if I'm a Bills fan.
I don't know how they're going to fix it, but I have a couple interesting things for you here.
Mm-hmm.
They are as we talked about with the Cardinals, they're a Hail Mary away from being under 500. The Bills are a Hail Mary away from being 10-2 on a 3, 4, 5, 6 game win streak. They're 9-3 on a 2-game win streak. So that's a big play in the grand scheme of things, because if that doesn't hit, right, the DeAndre Hopkins catch, we're talking about a 2-game lead with 4 to play, with games against the Broncos and the Dolphins, so they can lock it up pretty easily. The other thing is that when they play AFC playoff teams, they don't do so well. They beat the Dolphins week 2. They lost to Tennessee, and they lost to Kansas City. Other than that, they haven't played a single AFC playoff team. So those are 2 things that I'm concerned about in addition to the defense. Or really one thing. The Hail Mary thing is just a coincidence. But one thing that I'm definitely concerned about outside of the defense is their inability to beat good teams in the AFC. They did beat the Seahawks, but in the AFC, not so hot. So I am interested to see how this defense responds. I am interested because this is the big game for them, right? Sunday night against the Steelers. Steelers now looking for a bounce back. They need that bye, man. They haven't had a bye since week 4, and that really wasn't even a bye week. So they need a bye week, Pittsburgh. And coming off a loss on Sunday Night Football, that is a huge, huge, huge game for both of those teams, and that is a huge test for the Bills defense. So I think a lot of our questions about the Bills defense, which are valid, will be answered by about 11:30 Sunday night.